Since we're not all on the same page about PACT, I'm going to take us through a little bit of it. And it began, in reality, with an incident that happened December 17th, 1979, with Arthur McDuffie. Some of you remember Arthur McDuffie was an insurance agent who went through a red light and was beaten eventually to death by a group of officers. In the trial, for the 4 police officers, they were acquitted by an all-white jury. And during that time, there were a lot of events happening in the cities that were called riots, where there was internal burning and rioting and all kinds of damage that was done. But also in those riots in Miami, 18 people were killed, 400 more were injured, and there was over $100 million in property damage. Out of that, there were responses from various parts of the community. And in the religious community in Miami-Dade, there was this coming together of 7 congregations who formed PACT. 4 of those congregations, those original congregations, are still with us. St. Mary's Cathedral, St. James Catholic Church, First United Methodist Church, and Corpus Christi. Holly Holcomb, where are you? Where's Holly? Holly is over there. She was our first PACT organizer, and so she's with us. So one of the first issues, for those of you who remember Miami Vice days, were crack houses. And the issue of crack houses were in the neighborhoods and across the street from some of the churches and some of the schools, and PACT organized in order to try and shut down crack houses. Eventually, over 300 crack houses were shut down. That was a major effort. Many parts of the community organized to do that. PACT's initial was really important, and then we have these pictures with students holding up signs. This was by St. Mary's. PACT wants action, no more crack houses. Our students got involved at that stage, as well as we're seeing now with gun violence. We got involved in 1994 in the housing issue, and we were able to get 2 local banks to commit $38 million low-income affordable housing. So that, even though we're continuing to deal with affordable housing, it's been an ongoing issue, and we've tried various different ways in order to do it. We also noticed, we found that many of the officers who were dealing with the Haitian community, that there were none that spoke Haitian Creole. And so we worked with the police to develop a cadre of officers that could speak the language that many of these individuals spoke, and they weren't as fluent in English, and they could work together. We've been dealing with immigration all these years. 1999, we dealt with the INS Immigration and National Service and required a mandatory 2-day training so that it was for the staff and to build their cultural awareness of the kind of people that they were dealing with and to be sensitive to some of those issues. We've been involved in education since the late 90s. At that time, 6 of the 190 elementary schools in Miami-Dade were below the 30th percentile, 30 percentile of standardized testing. And by the time we had worked with the Miami-Dade School Board, we directed a number of programs. We got some state funding that came as well, and we took 12 of the F, D, and C schools and turned them into A, B, and C schools by 2002. And the theme of that was all children can learn to read. So you see some of the themes we're still dealing with, we've dealt with in different ways a long time. In fact, many of these are referenced in a book that was published by Rutgers University called Churches and Charity in the Immigrant City, Religion, Immigration, and Civic Engagement in Miami by Alex Stepnick, Terry Ray, and Sarah J. Mahler. So if you wanted to read more on it, there actually is some literature on it. So we had a big victory dealing with transportation. It's not something we're dealing with right now, but many of you remember the half-penny tax. And it involved the nature of buses that there were not enough buses, they were not efficient buses, they were not in the right times, they were overcrowded. There were many people who were either late to work or couldn't get to work because of this poor transportation system. And we were able to pass that ordinance which improved the system, not as much as we think it should, but it did make a big improvement at that time and was very helpful. At the same time, we started dealing with jobs. Oh, I wanted to point out, we're going to hear from Opal Weinbrenner. Where's Opal? Back there. Because she was a PACT member. She's been a PACT member for years, and she's been monitoring that situation, and she's going to speak to us a little later. We've been dealing with jobs, the jobs issue in specific. When there were contracts for Miami-Dade, there was no obligation to give the jobs to residents of Miami-Dade. And so we worked eventually to get Barbara Jordan, Commissioner Barbara Jordan did a lot of work with us, and we were able in 2012 to get a local hiring ordinance, which meant that first we had to offer it. We had to train and then offer it to Miami-Dade residents. And it actually resulted in over 1,000 jobs being added, 1,000 of our Miami-Dade residents getting jobs that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So you all know we've worked now on juvenile justice in various ways. We've been working on it since 2011. There was the out-of-school suspension, which now we've had eliminated. We had the creation of the success centers and the implementation of restorative justice, which we just announced is going to now be in all the middle schools next year. All 49 middle schools will have restorative justice next year. We've been dealing with keeping the kids off the streets, keeping them in schools, and stopping the school to prison pipeline. That's been really important, and it's affected a lot of kids. And in that process, we've worked with all of the police departments in Miami-Dade, the various kind of police authorities, because the system of civil citation has been so accepted here, and it's been so helpful in keeping kids out of the juvenile system for nonviolent crimes, for when they mess up in a nonviolent way, they don't go immediately into the juvenile system. They're able to get a civil citation, even up to 3 of them in Miami-Dade. So we've worked with all of our partners in the D.A.R.T system, the equivalents of PACT throughout the state of Florida, and we've been working the last few years, and finally the governor signed this year in an ordinance which actually extends civil citation throughout the state of Florida in a way that will save over 5,000 kids this year from being brought into the juvenile system, and will allow them to have civil citations. We still hope to make it a more generous program and a more universal program, but that's our ongoing work. There are only a couple of other things I want to highlight in this history, but most importantly, it's to remind ourselves that we've been at this for 3 decades. 3 decades as an organization. And some in the room have been doing it that long, and some have been doing it a few months. But the reality is this is hard work. This takes time. There's no one issue in all of these successes that happened immediately. There's no silver bullet in any of this work. This is a grinding process. The monitoring of the bus ordinance, the monitoring of the juvenile justice strides that we've made, looking at the success centers and making sure that they rise up to the standard that we believe and need them to be. All of that is the work of PACT. It isn't kind of this spectacular work where we can celebrate every day a wonderful success, but over this time, we have touched the lives of tens and hundreds of thousands of people within Miami-Dade in various ways that have improved their life. And we come to it as a faith community. We come to it from our different faiths, but we come as one community. And we affirm we are the largest grassroots organization in Miami-Dade. We're the only group that can pull together the kind of numbers we saw at the Nehemiah Action, and the power that we have is the power of individuals coming together as community in order to make change, to demand changes from our elected officials, from all officials that have any ability to make those changes. And we can't underestimate how important that is in the lives of individuals throughout our community. 30 years is still a short time, but it's changed lives. And if we can keep changing lives for the better, then we are fulfilling our obligation as an organization to do what we've set out to do. And I'm very proud of all the work that we've done together, not just this year, but for these 3 decades. And I hope that for the next 30 years and more, because there will still be a need in 30 years, trust me, we should remember there will still be a need for our grassroots organization to make a difference in our Miami-Dade community. Let justice roll.